Let's get together to co-create a breakthrough for freedom of energy, sustenance, healing, and regeneration of the human vessel. Welcome to FESIG, the Free Energy Special Interest Group, where science meets spirituality in the quest for truth and knowledge to free humanity and transform this planet into a paradise. Hi everyone. Hi. Welcome to FESIG's 97th meeting. Today is the 2nd of February. It is the second day of Chinese New Year. Chinese New Year, first day was the 1st of February. So anyway, it's I would like to wish all the Chinese followers and subscribers in our database a very happy Chinese New Year. Gong Xi Fa Cai to all of you. There you go. Right. So this is our 97th meeting. I have with me Dr. Fresfrezel, Pontus Hester, and James Rink. I don't know if James is already here, but anyway, he will turn up by and by, as always. So there you go. So we have the first session speaker will be Palden Jenkins. Palden is a renowned author, philosopher, and the editor of The Only Planet of Choice, which has been widely acclaimed as one of the most significant books of our time. Palden will speak about its behind the scenes, investigating the trajectory of the 21st century and where it is all going, the social change, existential risks, and the planetarization of consciousness. And then I have also with us here, Dan Winter, and his partner, Valerie Senlin, whom I'll be calling upon to help me lead the forum with Palden, discussing the Council of Nine Briefings of more than 25 years ago from deep space to see if we have already evolved with these briefings, whether it has helped us to prepare ourselves better for today's devastatingly dark Extinction Agenda 2030. Some deep thoughts here, folks. We will get it discussed. All right. So once we have done that, forum, of course, we invite you, members of the audience, live, who would like to participate in the Q&A with Palden, Dan and I, and Valerie. That'd be great. So the second session, then, we will have Niels Rune-Donnison, who will be talking on understanding the common law, which is quite essential these days to enforce human rights. In his talk, Niels will be teaching the essence of what we can do and what we should do to stand up for our rights. His synopsis of his talk would be the three basic legal systems: civil law, common law, and religion law, and the rest of it. And folks, once we finish that one, it will be a short session for the second session. Please pen down in your diary our 98th FESIG meeting, where we will surprise you some of the most amazing, fantastic speakers, some of the most brilliant thinkers of our times to talk in our platform. And please pen down your diary, the 2nd of March, 2022, okay? Right, so I would like to then ask Pontus if you would. Oh, James is coming in now. Yeah, I'm going to stop sharing screen now. Pontus, if you could share screen on the MailChimp out so we can see some graphics of our mail outs, our newsletters, our reports of the last meetings and everything. And it's all together with the invitation to call for to join us in our meetings. Okay, so it goes out like this. You're invited to join the 97th FESIG meeting. This goes out only once a month, okay, with my little write-up on report on what's going on and all that. If you could scroll down a little bit. So with this, all in one shot, you receive the Zoom code and the whatever to attend the meeting and who is speaking and who's not. Yeah, and I mean, and the reports of the last meetings. Yeah. So Pontus, if you could scroll down a bit. Yeah. So if you want to receive this, please click on subscribe or join us in our website, and you will be in the database, okay? So we have also reached the point of our development that need to explore kinetic energy. We're opening up a mechanical engineering group to explore magnetic generating systems. So anybody interested in magnetic generating systems, come and join us in our second FESIG second R&D team. It will be fun because we need resourceful people who's already, like, we are building the Atom's motor generator right now. So if you had some experience doing that, wouldn't it be nice to work together in a team, in a group, so we can share ideas and even share materials or whatever, so we can do it fast. With the energy costs rising about 3 times to 4 times everywhere, I think it's about time we get something done quickly to help the people, so we can teach people everywhere there how to build their own small little free energy devices. Yes, thanks, Pontus. So we have Palden. Palden has his thoughts from the far beyond in his website. So you could go to his click on his name and it will take you to his website. These are all linked up, yeah. And then the only planet of choice, Palden has his own link as well in his website that you can read the preface and about the book, which is I put behind him here, the only planet of choice. Okay, thank you, Pontus. If you could scroll down a bit, yeah. Yeah, it's all there. You want to read about how the book came about and all that, is all the links are all there. Okay, if you scroll down a bit more. Yeah, and then you see Dan and I there, we will be leading the forum on the book study session later with Palden. So, and then if you could scroll down a bit, and the second session, we'll see Niels Donison doing the second session. Thank you, Pontus, for sharing screen on that one. I think I will have to quickly introduce Palden now. So if you could bear with me. I would like to introduce Palden because this is a great achiever of a star seed here on the planet, a very active consciousness activist that we have here with us. Palden Jenkins is renowned for his work. Yeah. All right, so I'm going to start now. Okay, so Palden is a renowned author and philosopher and the editor of The Only Planet of Choice, which has been widely acknowledged as one of the most significant books of our time, which I said earlier. So he'll be touching the subjects as what I had said earlier. So this book actually represents the outcome of over 20 years of the transceiver Phyllis Schlemmer's work with her colleagues, Dr. Andrija Puharich, who discovered Uri Geller, and Sir John Whitmore of England, who became a very good friend of Palden whilst the work was going on, as well as many other distinguished scientists, scholars, and theologians. Palden is a well-loved and accomplished author. He wrote, I think more than half a dozen books of his own. He's a renowned philosopher. And being the editor of The Only Planet of Choice, he gets to go into the insights and the behind the scenes and talking to the people and getting to know so much about the book that I think we need to actually address this book through Palden's experience and eyes. He was commissioned to compile this life-changing monumental book in 1991 to 1992. Everything you ever wanted to know about the universe but didn't know who to ask. This is it. This is the book. It's published by Gateway Books. It's essential briefings from deep space. It makes the startling claim that the human species exists throughout the universe and that there has been systematic collusion amongst the major world governments in the last 60 years to prevent the evidence of ongoing contacts with extraterrestrial visitors becoming public. Sad thing. So this is the first book to deal with the background and reasons for these cosmic visits. Right, it made up of hundreds of transcripts transmitted through the channel Phyllis Schlemmer over a period of more than 20 years from a group of universal beings known as Council of Nine. Members of a distinguished international research group who have worked with Phyllis include such famous names as the Star Trek creator, Gene Roddenberry, who was inspired by these briefings to give a Star Trek on the screen. Former British racing driver Sir John Whitmore and the British Olympic hurdler David Hemery, together with Andrija Puharich, Lyall Watson, Werner Erhart, and others. Palden edited the transcripts from the vast number of tape recordings of the channeled sessions. The nine are a circle of highly evolved beings living in one sense at the center of the universe, though in another sense outside time and space, whose responsibility is to maintain balance throughout the universe. Right, so I think without much ado, I will pass it over. Oh, they communicate through their spokesperson, Tom, T-O-M. If Palden mentioned that, that's the nine, anciently known as Atum, as Dan had remembered the name Atum, conceived by Phyllis Schlemmer, okay, who is a distinguished deep-trance channel. Of course, I have invited the renowned prolific writer, philosopher, and inventor, Dan Winter, who is also himself an author of a lot of publications and numerous books himself. He then lectured on the evolution of consciousness, sacred geometry, and coherent emotion. He founded many projects on these subjects, including Science of Peacemaking, The Origin of Negentropy, Golden Ratio, Phase Conjugation, to the Planck Sphere, to join Palden to lead and me to lead the forum for the book study, okay, discussing the Council of Nine Briefings from deep space to see if we have evolved, whether the nine briefings then has helped us to prepare ourselves better for today's devastatingly dark Extinction Agenda 2030. Right, so over to you now, Palden. Thank you so much. We are so honored to have you here with us.
My pleasure, and nice to meet you all. So I'm not exactly sure what you'll be interested in, but I thought I would just start by telling you how I fell into this whole business, really. It started with someone who was a good friend of mine in the 1970s when I was living in Sweden as a political refugee at the time. And his name was Jan Fjellander, and I think a couple of you might know him. He was a parapsychologist and UFO investigator and people like that. And he and another person I used to hang out with in Sweden called Sir Anthony Brooke, who was a peace activist and UFO investigator. And anyway, we did a few things together, including radio programs and investigating a few sightings and this kind of thing. And then one time Jan came to me bearing a wad of paper and he said, "Palden, you've got to read this." And it was a photocopy of the book by Alan Holroyd called Briefing for the Landing on Planet Earth. And this was the first proper book about the nine, and it came out in about 1977 or 78. And I read this and it just bowled me over. And this was quite important because I had, I woke up as an acid dropping hippie in the 1960s, grew up in Liverpool, and I waded through all sorts of different ideas during my first 10 years as a seeker, and landed up in rather a confused state. Although I have a lot to owe to Tibetan lamas for sort of straightening me up on a lot of things. But when the Nine book came along, suddenly I just felt this is the stuff, this is it. I really want to meet these people. And anyway, time went on. I completely forgot about that. And then about 12 years later, I was at work and I was working as a book editor in the mind, body, spirit area of publishing. And I was at work and my publisher, Alec Bartholomew, was on the phone And he turns to me with a sort of a funny look and he says, Palden, do you fancy editing a book of extraterrestrial communications? And I said, to be honest, I'm not sure if I'm interested, to be honest. And I went back to work and he carried on. But then suddenly I started getting this feeling on the top of my head, and it was just going boing, 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 like this. And I said to Alec, when you finish, put the guy on. So I had a chat with this chap, and it was someone called Sir John Whitmore. And he was looking for, he started recounting this, and suddenly I realized, shit, it's the same people. It's those people in that book that I read. So I said, all right, let's have a go. And so he said, well, we'll have an interview. So I went along next week to his place in southeast of London. And we had an interview with him and with Phyllis, and it all seemed to work well, and that was good. And then we had lunch, and then John said, now for the interview. I said, all right. And he said, well, you're going to talk to the Nine. So I thought, all right. So that went on. And there's quite a procedure we have to go through when Phyllis goes into a trance. And so we did that. And I was talking to the Nine. And one of the things that was bugging me, one of the things that was troubling me, was I was wondering whether I was the right kind of person for this, because in the year or two before that, I'd gone through a terrible life crisis, and I wasn't feeling at all confident about myself, or not very worthy, or very, you know, I was feeling quite like a failure in many respects. And so I was worried about this. And I said, are you sure that you've got the right person? And they said, well, we chose you. And I said, all right. And do you think, are you confident that I'm capable of doing this job? And they said, you're the first person we have met in this whole phase of interacting with humans, probably in the last couple of decades. You're the first person we've met who needs no preparation. And this was like a shock to me. I sort of just fell off my seat, you know, and it was a real shock. And I was reeling from that. But anyway, I went home, and with a big box full of 7,000 pages of transcripts. And I sat and I looked at this and I thought, how on earth am I going to do this? You know, like, this is just dense material. And how am I going to sort through all this lot? And I paced around about it for a few days. And then something in me said, all right, just start at the beginning and go forward from there. And so I started going through the manuscript on computer. And every time I came to an interesting bit, I'd copy and paste it into a new file. And I had a system for naming the files. And then I put it away, and I just carried on. And I carried on like this. And I had to sort out a lot of the communications which were personal communications, people asking personal questions, unless they were of general interest, and also if the person's identity could be discluded from it, sort of thing, I would include it then. So anyway, after 9 months of this, I landed up with 700 files of chunks, which were very loosely sorted. And again, I thought, what on earth am I going to do with this? And then a couple of mornings later, I woke up and I just thought, start with the first, just do it intuitively, Palden, trust that you can do it. And so I started, and I had all these banks of file names in front of me, and I just went, boink, that one, opened it up, and there was the first piece, the first chunk. And then that was really interesting. And then I just opened up the next one, and there was the next. It was quite an amazing process, actually. And it carried on like this. And there would be occasions when I would reach a difficult bit and I'd sleep on it and go for a walk or take a weekend off or something like that. And I'd come back, pick one, there it was. And basically that's how the book came together. I didn't even have a full chapter plan, but I did sort of work out a general structure, but it just kind of unfolded, and then I just sort of worked my way through it. And it was very interesting because, I mean, I'm a bit psychic too, but not in the same way as Phyllis. And I don't do channeling either, but I have experienced what I'd call psychic editing with someone else. And that was a chap called Sir John Whitmore. Sorry, not Sir John Whitmore. My brain's, sorry, you'll know who I mean. I've got a brain block. It'll come. But anyway, he was basically he was regarded as the grandfather of the English New Age movement. And Sir George Trevelyan. And I had been his helper for the last 2 years of his life until he died. And then afterwards, I made a decision with another person to make an archive of all his written work. And the same process happened then. I was building this archive website for him, and I would reach a question mark and I'd think, okay, Sir George, what do you want? You know, like, and he'd say, blue background, yellow title, and silver text. And I go, all right, try it out. And then I'd sort of say, I wonder what picture I'm going to put in here. And I just sort of look around and I go, how about that one? And you go, yep, that's it. Or, you know, or something like that. And so it was fascinating. And so I've experienced this kind of what I can only call psychic editing in two major chunks. And it's been quite an interesting process, really, that. So that was the story about how how I got involved with that. It was a major life changer for me. One of the things I really liked about this was that the nine were not interested in collecting followers, and they were not interested in persuading people to change their belief system. They were interested in adding to people's understanding of things. And one of the most remarkable things I found about the material that they produced was that it seemed to say different things to different people. And this is what Christians might call speaking in tongues, or it's what Buddhists might call, what's the word? I forget what the term is, but it's the ability of the Buddhas to communicate with anyone in ways that they need to understand it. And there was something about this, about what the nine were talking about. And also I really liked the way that they were quite factually informative, which is not very common in psychically channeled material. And also some of their statements, even if they were just delivered in one line, were just really quite remarkable. And I'm still working on things like that now. One of the statements that they made, which really was a life changer for me, was only do things you can respect yourself for. Now that sounds dreadfully simple, but the implications of that are tremendous. And I've been working on that for 30 years, and I don't think I've mastered it quite yet. but there were these amazing, simple answers which they would give, which were quite remarkable. Perhaps I should say something about the channeling process. This was quite interesting because it was clear that these beings had not experienced life on Earth or anything like it. And the channeling process involved their using Phyllis's brain she liked to use the word transceiving. and they would drop ideas in, not in terms of words, but in terms of, what could you call it? Information bundles or something, I don't know, it's difficult to say. And they would have to use the vocabulary and the syntax that was available in Phyllis's brain. As it happens, she had quite a good brain. And also it was very clear that they were also pulling on the brain power of people they talked to, who were asking questions, for example. And this comes up in the book, where the kinds of answers they give to different kinds of people were quite different, and they very much reflected the character and the insights and the intellect of the people who were asking the questions. And this was a key thing with this, that they didn't actually volunteer information, but they responded openly to anything they were asked. And this is a very, very key issue. It's what in Star Trek became called the Prime Directive. It's to do with the whole process of non-interference in the ways of humans. And here we come to their explanation of what the situation is on planet Earth. And I don't know if you would like me to go into that. I could try and do it in about 5 minutes. Would you be interested in that kind of thing?
Yeah, of course, Palden. Whatever you feel is coming into your head and your heart, flow with it. Thank you.
Yeah, okay. Well, they distinctly created a picture where they were saying planet Earth is not like other worlds. On most other worlds, groups, races, nations, however you'd call them, of beings tend to co-evolve together along various kinds of evolutionary paths. But planet Earth is basically like a kind of a New York City or a Singapore. It's not a place where the beings of planet Earth have co-evolved together as one planetary race. Basically, we all came in from somewhere else. And they warned us that it was going to be an uphill grind, this one, and it was going to be more difficult than we thought it was going to be. And the issue was something completely new, which is about introducing high consciousness, free will, creator souls into dense physical existence. And basically they were saying that planet Earth is the densest planet inhabited by conscious beings that exists. And they were also saying that this was basically a kind of a trial experiment to see what would happen. And there was a key ingredient to this, which was about opening up a new level of reality that had not been opened up before. And one of the key elements of this was that all of the souls who came in would be given individualized free will. Now, what they were more or less saying is, we couldn't go into this in great depth because they were repeatedly saying, unfortunately, you don't have the concepts to understand what we would like to explain to you. But one of the things they were talking about here was that the importance of this individualized free will is that it's a new level of creativity which was being opened up in the universe on a new level of physicality, of density of physicality. And they gave a reasonable idea of the history of all this, which I won't go into now, but they went back to 32,000 BCE, particularly as a major turning point in this. And the mechanisms they were talking about was an interesting classic resolution. They were so good at resolving so many of our dilemmas. And their explanation was basically that life on planet Earth has evolved by a mixture of extraterrestrial and extra-dimensional intervention and natural evolution. And they were saying you can't do it without natural evolution because it just won't work. Universes are too complex for engineers to create. They have to have their own creative and evolutionary power, and then, a bit like a sympathetic gardener, people can come in and intervene in that in a variety of different ways. They would do it by messing with the morphogenetic fields of a planet with its essential programming. They would do it by genetic introductions. They would do it by psychic and intellectual and religious downloads of ideas. They would do it by incarnating souls in the world to bring about ideas. One person, for example, I've worked with editing his books, who I think is a classic example of one of these people, was Victor Schauberger, who I'm sure you all know. And I was involved in the editing of 4 or 5 of his books by Callum Coates. And so you know, there were all these kinds of ways they have, but also it was so important, this matter of free will. And this is where, while they do make some interventions, they restrain it tremendously, because the whole planet Earth agenda is based on this idea of free will. And if they intervene, it's over. That agenda is over. Now, the importance of that is that this was a big surprise to me. They were saying, look, your planetary problem is not just a problem for you, it's a problem for the whole universe. And it took a while for the reality of this to come out. But one of the issues which they were talking about was, the thing is, you humans have evolved in a way that no one else has evolved. This is entirely new stuff. And the problem is that if you screw up, if you blow up your world, for example, we will not be able to handle your souls as refugees. Now, I've worked in humanitarian work in war zones, Northern Ireland, Bosnia, Kosovo, Palestine, Syria. And one of the interesting things there is that when you're working with people who are in a devastation zone, if you're a Westerner growing up in a comfortable country like our countries, we do not understand what it's like being one of those people. And the pain and the psychological issues, psycho-spiritual issues that such people go through cannot be understood fully by even the most well-meaning person trained in the most advanced trauma techniques. I know, I've done it, you know, and quite frankly, I in all my 25 years of work with the Palestinians, I think they taught me more than I taught them. But anyway, we won't go into that. So the issue here is they cannot and will not intervene because it will spoil the whole agenda. Now, the problem here is that the agenda has gone wrong. Back in history, we screwed a lot of things up and we started misusing our powers, our technological, genetic, psycho-spiritual powers. And this is what allegorically, this is what, in terms of mythology, is what the Atlantis myth is all about, the Atlantis tradition. And so we've gone off course. And one of the key ingredients they talked about here is that you have forgotten why you came. You get so caught up in all of the intricacies, the pain, the pleasure, the complications of living on planet Earth, that you forget the reason why you're here. And one of the shocking statistics they gave was that of all of the people they send down, only 2% of them remember their full reason for being. Although they also did say that another lot, I think it was around 15% more, remembered it partially, and they became musicians, creative people, inventors, and people who do bring through good stuff, but it might not be to their full capacity, often because of the circumstances we live in. You know, I'm sure you all know this one. And then they were also saying that a large proportion of these people become alcoholics, drug addicts, or in various different ways, they have difficulty fitting in with society, which I can fully relate to. So it's a very challenging environment to work in, as you all know. And there was a period which came up in the briefing for the landing on planet Earth, where there was likely to be an intervention in 1977. And this was because they said, basically, we will intervene only on one basis, and that is that you are right on the edge of completely destroying yourselves. Otherwise, we cannot and will not intervene, because both actually would be a failure of at least 30,000 years hard work and of a whole planetary evolution. But this is not just about a planet. And if those of you who read the book, I don't know if you noticed the finely disguised final truth that was in the second or third to last page of the book. But I'll give it to you, which is the nine gave an explanation about basically roughly how the universe is managed. And they take care of one particular department, you could say, which is about the universal balances of what we might call light and dark, yin or yang, or the binary. And planet Earth is a very intensely binary place, where we have even created the concept that spiritual and material can be different. That's quite unique to us, you know. And we have all these dilemmas, these problems. And in addition, we all come from very different places. One of the things the nine were talking about is that the whole universe is here. But there are some races of beings who are quite major, quite big, and they identified various different groups. The people who are, say, the Proto-Europeans, and the people who are, say, the Proto-Chinese, Proto-Asians, people like this. And they said a few controversial things also about the genetic origins of humanity, which roused a lot of debate. Basically, one of the things they were saying was that at least some of the original Africans were the closest to the original beings that were being evolved to become humans, whereas the other races of humanity are basically crossbreeds between them and introduced souls, introduced genetics of different kinds. And the interesting thing about this is that the genome sequencing of the last couple of decades have discovered that the genetic variation amongst Africans is greater than that for the whole of the rest of humanity, which says something about these introduced genes. That somewhere there was some genetic engineering going on in the early development of humanity. And they were saying also that this lies at the center of some of the problems you have on planet Earth, which is the dreadful incapacity of humans to agree and to recognize each other as one planetary race. And that this makes planet Earth extra interesting as a world to watch. And the final truth that I was coming to, which is that they said that basically the universe is run by what they called 24 civilizations, which you could say cover different principles of the universe and the way that the universe has been evolved and is managed and works itself through. And they were saying basically planet Earth is one of the 24. And we dropped out around about the end of what they were calling the Atlantean period, although don't get too mixed up with Platonic ideas and things. They weren't directly relating to the Greek traditions or other traditions, but they were saying that basically planet Earth dropped out. And so in effect, there are 23 civilizations and one gap. And this makes it very important because that gap involves the next level of universal evolution. And that's what they were trying to bring about on planet Earth. And this is why planet Earth is far more important than we understand. And in a sense, the whole universe is waiting. but they had this other worry as well, which is that if you lot really screw up, then we won't know what to do with you. But on the other hand, if you succeed in your breakthrough, if you manage to fix things on planet Earth, having gone thus far, then you'll be like super troopers. You'll be like the SAS. You'll be so highly trained in the matters of existence and in the dynamics of consciousness and in the physics of dense material form. You'll be so hot and so good at this that basically the universe will receive an upgrade. So this all sounds rather megalomaniac and rather big, but can you see what this is? You know, if their picture is true, then can you see what they're talking about here? This is an enormous thing. And it puts planet Earth, even though we are in one sense very much a quarantined planet at the moment, and we're stuck out on the edge of the universe in a manner of speaking, but in another way, it's a very interesting hybridization station in terms of human experience. Now, I've got an interesting parallel because, as I was saying earlier, I worked with Palestinians, and we have a bunch of people, it's about 2.5 million people who are penned up in Gaza, and they have very, very little contact with the rest of the world, very little indeed. And I know quite a lot of young people in Gaza, and they grow up, and some of these people are really intelligent, and the Palestinians also have an incredibly high educational level. They're the third highest qualified ethnic group in the world, and they surpass even Jews. And yet you've got all these people in Gaza who are all penned up, and so they're on a bit of a separate evolution from the rest of us in the world. And one of the interesting things there is that they are not being affected by the development frenzy, as many Asians, for example, are getting affected. And so there's something there where when Palestinians say to me, I wish I could get out of Gaza, I say to them, well, I completely understand. And I agree with you. I completely understand what you're talking about, but it's terrible out here. And you will find it's very, very difficult. And I've had this with Gazans who eventually, one of them got out to Germany, and he'd been in Germany for 4 days. And he said, everything's wrapped in plastic here. And no one says hello to each other. You know, the Palestinians have incredible family structures, and that's how the Gazans survive, actually, is by the strength of their society. You do not get cholera in Gaza. You do not get homelessness. You do not get starvation, because they are a society that is operating on a different basis. And I keep telling the Palestinians, please hang in there, because you are going to be the aid workers of the future when aid involves psycho-spiritual support in strengthening society. Because that's the way we're going in the whole aid and development business, you know. So I was just talking about Gaza just as a little example of, it's rather like planet Earth, stacked full of quite damaged people who are, in a sense, imprisoned here, and we're being watched from outside. But there's very, very little contact, you know. Although, of course, I imagine all of you have some knowledge and understanding of that kind of contact. And one of the areas of contact which I've been involved with quite a bit has been crop formations, which I've very much taken to be, well, not exactly, I don't think the Nine are directly involved in it, but they're indirectly involved in all sorts of stuff. And some of the amazingly subtle things that went on with the whole crop circle phenomenon, particularly with the energy fields inside crop formations, were, I think, kinds of ambassadorial feelers to try and establish communication. Because the trouble is, as the Nine talked about, the thing is, they were saying we cannot, that people would ask them, when's the landing going to happen? When are you going to come, you know, and show yourselves to us? And they said, well, we do this plenty of times and you don't take any notice, you know. But they were saying, really, we cannot reveal ourselves to you until you have risen to a level where you can meet us as equals. And this is very, very important. They pointed out how when European colonizers went round to different continents in the world, basically, they just wiped people out with cannon shot or disease or violence or all sorts of different things. And it wasn't that Europeans were exactly meaning to do this. It's just that that's the way it happened, because there wasn't proper contact between the cultures which met. And so they were very much saying, we cannot really reveal ourselves to you until and unless you have risen to a certain level where you can manage it. And they gave various examples of when they initially had contact with the American government in the 1940s, they did give them a few technological ideas and things like that. And they watched with dismay to see how this was misused. And so basically they withdrew contact with the American government in 1952. And they haven't talked to them since. And so this is roughly what the Nine have been going on about. People often ask me, when are the Nine going to say something more? And quite frankly, my answer to that is they don't need to. This was not just a book of information. It was a book of between the lines. And it gave a reader ways of seeing and analyzing and working things out themselves. And they were very concerned, in particular, about not wanting to build any cults or followings. And they didn't want any confusion over the channeling process. And so they said that Phyllis Schlemmer would be the only person they would talk through. And anyone else who said so would not be the Council of Nine. However, they did say, this doesn't mean to say that they might not be someone who are part of what they called the civilizations. In other words, civilizations working with them who would say things, communicate things which are in a way compatible, or they are variations of different reality perceptions which are valid in their own right. And they gave examples of people like Alice Bailey and Jane Roberts, and I can't remember anymore. There was the Law of One. I forget the names of the people, but some people who did a book called The Law of One. And so they gave a few names and they said these, oh yes, another one was the Course of Miracles. And they were saying these are from the civilizations, and they have their own worth, and they come to speak to people who resonate on the levels of those particular civilizations, you know. And so it was a very, very interesting process, a life changer for me. Mm-hmm. While I was doing the process, it was interesting because I was living in a very accessible place in Glastonbury. I was living on the road. Those of you who've been to Glastonbury, I was living on the road between the shopping street and the Tor, Glastonbury Tor. And everyone who visits Glastonbury walks along that road. And so I was living on that road, but on the day I received the manuscript and started work, my telephone stopped ringing and people did not knock on my door for about 1 year and 8 months. And I was just going from my office to my bed to my kitchen and back again, with occasional quiet escapes to the mountains of Wales just to get some space. And this went on for 1 year and 8 months or so. And the fascinating thing was that on the day that I handed over the floppy disks with the material on, the phone started ringing. And people were coming to my door and they were saying, "Where have you been, Palden? Have you been away?" And I said, "No, I've been here all the time."
You've been teleported.
Well, there was an incredibly strong force field around my house. And actually only three people got in who in a way became my minders. You know, they'd just come along every now and then and help out a little bit with the house, or bring me some food, or have a welcome chat or something like that, you know. And so that was the process. And after that, although I haven't had verbal contact with the Nine, I felt I've had very much inner contact. And one of the things they asked us to do was to do coordinated meditations in connection with them, so that they could use us as, well, I kind of visualized it as kinds of drones. That's quite a good analogy, because they don't know about life on planet Earth. They can't work directly with us. They have to work through humans or through some very complex mechanism in order to get through to our physical world. And so I started a project in the mid-1990s called the 100th Monkey Project, which was large group work of a circle of about 100 people doing consciousness work together in relation to world events of the time. And we worked with Bosnia, with forest fires, with nuclear testing in the Pacific, with, I can't remember all the different things we worked with now in the mid-1990s, but we did consciousness work with it, and I very much felt the nine were with us, and we, on occasions, things happened shortly after our doing this work, which certainly were synchronistic. It's unwise to claim we did it.
Fantastic.
But certainly there was a synchronicity between what the work we were doing and the results that came out. I'll give you an example, which was a very difficult one. 1995, we did some work on Bosnia, and it was a group of about 100 people. We were using meditation, talking stick, role play, psychodrama in this group. And we were processing this for 8 hours. And we took only short breaks, which were silent breaks. And we kept on processing this until we were finished. And we came out of that session hungry and completely blown away by the experience. And on the news that night, we heard that a bunch of drunken Serb soldiers had just bombed Sarajevo and killed 60 people in a marketplace while we were in session and doing this work. And of course, we were really upset by this. And you can imagine some of the implications of this kind of thing, because we were really well-meaning. Anyway, fast forward 5-6 days, NATO decides to go in. Fast forward another 2 days, the war is over. And I had a big learning from that this is definitely not about love and light, and that sometimes difficult things can happen, and that we, in this kind of work, we really have to get our own human values out of the way. In that situation, I think it is reasonable to say that 60 people lost their lives, but it was a meaningful sacrifice, because it changed things and it saved the lives of other people. It made me very aware of all of the people who die meaningless lives.
Palden, my apologies.
Change things. Yeah, sorry.
My apologies to interrupt. I know the viewers whack me for interrupting. Such pearls of wisdoms rolling out from
well, that's good. I've kind of reached a conclusion now. So
yeah, I did promise you I won't keep you speaking for too long, because you have your health issues. So
I'm doing all right at the moment.
Yeah, you're on the, well, I mean, we made you talk for about almost an hour now, almost. So I think I'm going to begin with the second part of this presentation. I actually would like to make a quick summary before I get Dan Winter to come in to lead the forum with me, to discuss with you about the book and what has been being brought up just now. So number one, we're talking about, you were saying that the nine has this non-intervention stance, which all the other ET brothers and sisters that had come through with the messages and briefings also have that in mind, the prime directive kind of situation here. But the thing is, we are now at this stage that you were saying, unless we are on the brink of extinction, but we are now, aren't we? I mean, with the genocidal, devastating, forceful thing that's going on right now, I shall say, I won't mention any of the words there. So I think we need the intervention now. A divine intervention.
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
And to be honest, I think it does happen in small ways. There was a lovely instance a few years ago, for example, when a meteorite came in over Turkey, and a UFO just materialized and deflected it off course. And apparently the whole thing was witnessed by loads of pilots and air traffic control people and all sorts of people like this. And I think there are small interventions which take place when something really dangerous comes up. And also in some of my psychic work, I have participated in a few of these things myself. As I was saying, as a kind of a drone.
But it's not fair to say that we have failed, because we have volunteered to come in and make it right? Yeah. But we have been so terribly controlled, and our food chain, our water, our air has been terribly messed up with. And so it's just not fair. Everything has been controlled by the elitists. It's not fair to say that we hadn't done our work well and we have failed.
No, I was being extreme there. But this is, in the end, I think it's a kind of a spiritual and an emotional choice. I myself have, in all my life tests, and I've gone through a few dark souls of the night phases, I've always come out the other side somehow knowing we're going to get there. The real issue is how much destruction and how much suffering has to go on first. That's really, for me, is what the only question is. I do get very distressed over how long it's taking and about how so many new problems are arising which didn't need to arise. If, for example, we had started a planetary transformation in the 1960s, 70s, and 80s, we would have avoided or changed quite a few things by now in terms of social issues, climatological, you name it, technological issues, everything. And so, yeah, it's a difficult.
Yeah, and then if you're saying that this is the only planet of choice, well, we don't have much choices, do we? We've been just like pushed to a corner and stifled to death and being forced. So therefore, I mean, help, we need intervention. And if this is the universe of the four corners, if I remember correctly, I've read this book of yours in the late 90s, and I still remember it so clearly because I resonate so much with it, as Dan does. So the four corners of the universe has to be set right, balance. And this is the fourth corner that is not, that is a table with 3 legs without the fourth leg. So if we are the 24th civilization that is being dropped with leaving 23 civilizations, don't you think the 9 ought to come back and do something to help us, to set the fourth leg right so we can be balanced in the 4 corners of the universe?
I'm sure they would like to, but the problem is it's this free will business, is that the importance of free will, thinking metaphysically, if you think of God, or what the 9 used to call, what you call God, if you was to think of God as the creator of a game, and the aim of the game is for God to become conscious of who and what it is by finding out, amongst other things, what it is not, and by expressing itself into all sorts of forms which would be an expression of itself in order to find itself. And the thing is that if you were the creator of a game and you knew the outcome, this wouldn't do the job. It has to be a game of creation where even God doesn't know the outcome, because that would be ultimate creation.
Yeah.
Creating something more than what the creator is capable of thinking up. Yeah. And this is what's important to this whole thing. This is why, if they intervened, it would actually be a mission failure.
Right.
Because they would undermine the whole free will agenda of planet Earth, which was the whole reason why we're here.
Right.
And so this is a very difficult thing, but they did say very, very clearly that if it comes to a moment where there is no redemption, where you are right on the edge, we're in there.
Cool. Right. I would like to pass the microphone over to Dan Winter, the one and only Dan.
Hi, Crystal. Yeah. Well, I'm really, Palden and I should get one award here. Palden came to my lectures in Glastonbury something like 40 some years ago. So at a minimum, we should get the award for chronologically gifted here, right, Palden? But, I love Palden's story, but I beg to differ on one thing about the 9 not being back. Actually, you'd have to have completely ignored Elena Danaan and exopolitics, who are talking about nothing but the 9 for the last weeks. but I'd like to give some context to that. So, I didn't know Phyllis very well, and I only knew John Whitmore a bit, but I worked with Andrija Puharich for many years. And when Andrija first said, oh, it's Tom, and then Atum, and then he realized actually it was Enki. And Enki was the genetic engineer who did that messing around in South Africa for genetic diversity. So Palden got that right for sure. But that story actually goes on quite a bit, because once you realize that Enki was basically the cloner, Enki's high side, the family called Kadistu, the life designers, these were called the cedar races. And a major intervention did happen. The Galactic Federation basically kicked the Greys and the Draco, the Nebu out of the solar system in the last couple of years. And now the 9 have arrived in mass with the Intergalactic Federation. They call our galaxy Nataru, and they're present on Ganymede. And the usefulness of studying the physics of the 9, and this is where I spent many years. I was working with John McGovern, who then published with Tony Peratt on the plasma physics of the 9. You can see the pictures at goldenmean.info/whale dreamers. And when Los Alamos discovered that 9 plasma domains self-organized when they're nested 9 above the other, they realized they understood why there are 9 roofs of the pagoda and there are 9 stages in Dante's Inferno, etc. Why plasma becomes self-aware or self-organizing in this, what you might call Enneagram, or the Greek Ennead, or the Egyptian. Why did they? And even the Anunnaki, their hierarchy politically, body Polish, was called the 9. And the physics is that to learn how plasma becomes self-aware, how plasma becomes intelligent, this is an introduction to interstellar cedar races like the 9. Anyway, back to how I got into that interest and context was Andrija Puharich. At the time, I was doing lots of lectures with international psychotronics with him, but he was sort of like the nemesis of Ben Bentoff, who was also my long-term life partner. And we were teaching the biophysics of Kundalini. I was working in his lab. And Bentoff and Puharich were sort of antithesis. They were on opposite sides of the Arab-Israeli war, for example. And Bentoff always said that Puharich, unfortunately, had, well, let's just say bad astral hygiene, actually. And in fact, if you look at the way Andrija Puharich died at the Reynolds estate there, he had escaped from South America and he was chased by spooks, basically. So there was a lot of confusion in how Puharich introduced Schlemmer to the 9 Atum. But the high end of Enki's in relationship with the cedar races, which were called Kadistu, from which we get a word both Kiristu, Christ, and Caduceus, were described quite elegantly by Anton Park's many books on Enki, actually, which are quite useful. And so the history of the politics of Enki's relationship with the Kadistu had to do with Enki's relationship to his mother, who made genetic suggestions during the time when he was doing that. You can read about it at Anton Park's fractalfield.com/Zeitman. Anyway, the only thing I would say here is that I think Palden has done a beautiful job of describing that situation with Phyllis Schlemmer and how that evolved. But there's a whole lot of history since Phyllis Schlemmer and Andrija Puharich channeled the Nine. And I just made a 2-hour film with Elaine last night, actually. Well, in that case, it was about the plasma physics of ET craft propulsion, difference between warp drive and impulse power, as they call it, the Star Trek future. But when they're talking about the Star Trek future, they're also talking about Gene Roddenberry, who's right there with Phyllis Schlemmer, writing the Deep Space Nine. Mm-hmm. And maybe I'll just conclude this little section by reminding that in Deep Space Nine, Roddenberry's inspiration from Schlemmer and Puharich, one of the major revelations was, yes, your Stargate makes big money by being located next to the wormhole. That's old news. It's called transportation. But the new thing they found out was the plasma wormhole they called the Nine, in fact, had intent. In other words, you went down that wormhole and you thought you were using it for transport, but in fact, the wormhole was an intelligent tornado that decided where you were going to go because the plasma was self-aware. It's literally an eyeball. So what we've been teaching in recent years, in terms of what I've learned about the physics of consciousness from even my history with Puharich even, is the physics of consciousness is like the wormhole that became the story of the Nine. When you ask a child who is seeing without their eyes because they've gone into bliss, measured at flameandmind.com, they say, I'm seeing through a plasma vortex, a wormhole inside my head. The nature of what makes that plasma donut self-aware is a form of charge implosion. And I suggest humbly that what humans have forgotten is how to charge their aura with bliss so they become the kind of plasma that inherits stars. And that's what it means to grow up and become advanced plasma intelligences like the Nine. So anyway, there's some background.
Yeah, thanks for that.
Well, I actually wanted to say that Puharich, since you know him and he's your good friend, then I'm not surprised because you are very much into the science and the spirit stuff that Puharich is. He was a parapsychological researcher, medical inventor, physician and author as well. And I was wondering why you would sort of like thought that he was in a way murdered when he was the man in those days that the authorities, so-called, would hire to investigate whenever any parapsychology situation comes up. Dr. Andrija Puharich would be the one who is given the money to go and investigate. So whose side is he on?
Well, that's the thing. I think the key issue with all people who have done various forms of channeling is astral hygiene, which is the kind of discrimination it takes to know who you're talking to with advanced plasma intelligences. And unfortunately, Puharich clearly, in fact, he described and admitted after he came back with his tail between his legs from Mexico to hide at the Reynolds estate, before he apparently jumped off the porch, some say, infested with the low-grade spooks, exactly what Benthoff described as his problem. Now, I'm not saying that all Andrija's channelings were confused, not at all. I think, when he claimed to have met Atum, who really was called the same Atum that Akhenaten worshipped, actually, which is the sun god. And these advanced plasma intelligence do inhabit stars, literally sun gods. And every ancient religion of that day, and this for that matter, is a sun god religion, because if your plasma isn't big enough to inhabit a star, you didn't grow up. So, these people were doing something powerful and noble. But at the same time, Andrija was unable to discriminate, as Benthoff criticized. Andrija says, "Oh, well, airline tickets just fell from the ceiling," and Benthoff says, "Oh, no, you just are infested with low-grade spooks, actually." And the difference is astral hygiene, and astral hygiene is the skill to discriminate. But the example is when the ancient tribes would channel ancestors, they did so by forming a circle of very intense intent that would mean that only their ancestors could use that telephone. Now, that telephone is actually something that we've talked many times, that Korotkov measured, that he went to measure where the Kogis made ancestor phone calls and measured the quality of the air, which is called fractality in air. It's actually charge distribution efficiency. And that's how Kozyrev achieved telepathy as well. He went to magnetic line crosses. And that whole physics of how ancestor memories participate in a world grid, it's called longitudinal interferometry. It's literally the physics of Akashic records and communion of saints and ancestor memory and song lines and dreaming tracks. That is the physics of coherent longitudinal interferometry, something the body emits when it achieves this bliss state, the same which enables kids to see without their eyes. All of which requires understanding of these trance bliss states and how the aura becomes coherent enough to sort who's speaking through you. And that's called astral hygiene.
I think, if I may add something about Andrija here, I think in the last few years of his life, he was suffering from quite deep burnout and the long-term consequences of opposition and complexity and all sorts of things like that. I'd hazard to say he probably had Asperger's syndrome or something, and therefore was not very good at fitting in with human society anyway. And you can see this with various other people such as Wilhelm Reich or Victor Schauberger, who all came to rather unfortunate endings in the last few years of their lives.
True.
And so I think one of the things that you were saying, Dan, about I think he probably did lose his discernment in the last few years, and he was quite frankly beat up.
Oh,
And,
sorry.
Yes.
And yes. I can understand that, and God bless him, you know.
Yeah, and we're not in a position to criticize, and nor certainly I'm not in a position to judge, which is why I would just emphasize that one of the lessons here, though, is to learn how the plasma field of your aura grows and then becomes intelligent. For example, why you have 9 chakras, quite literally. It is 9 donuts, one above the other. And when they grow up, you get to be called the 9 also, actually. Yeah. And what makes them grow up is measurable. That aura is measurable. So the plasma physics of how plasma becomes self-aware, we do that with phase conjugate plasma, Therify.net in 25 countries doing rejuvenation. And we're able to trigger lucid dreaming and bliss, actually, with a designed electric field that grows plasma.
Yeah.
Andrija was the one who claimed to split water into hydrogen and oxygen in those days.
That's actually, you know, Tom Vallone was living with Andrija Puharich when he died, and Vincent Bridges, my other partner, was following him around trying to get his frequency signatures for hydrogen, actually hydrolysis. And today, you know, we have the frequency signature for hydrogen. It's called phase conjugation, and that is how you grow the aura.
So you carried on with the work.
Absolutely.
Well done. Well done, Dan. We love it. Anyway, so if you have any questions, members of the audience here on the floor, please post your questions. Please unmute yourself and ask Palden and Dan. Oh, I would like to introduce Valerie Sanderling. Valerie is Dan's partner, and she has been behind the scenes doing all this work, gathering the people for Dan, and so successfully well. And I really honor and respect you, Sister of the Light.
Thank you very much.
She's twinkling. She's twinkling.
Thank you. You have a few words to say here. You read the book a little bit, didn't you? You said something about it not being up to date, but Palden had his answer saying that the briefings from the 9 is complete and finished, and the rest is up to us. Whereas Dan was saying that, oh no, the 9 did come. There is an intervention through another name, through another group. But why is it that they take on other names and get us all confused as another group? Why couldn't they just reclaim that, oh, we were the 9 from Phyllis Schlemmer's time, from Palden's time?
They're actually talking, they're saying they are the 9, and they're talking about their relation to Roddenberry in depth now.
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting.
So thank you. And I had one question about the New Age, because they say it's very controversial, the New Age. So I was not
Valerie,
sure
we can't hear you very well. Could you come closer to the microphone?
Sorry, can you hear better now?
Yes.
Should I repeat what I said before? Just
yes. Please, yeah, repeat.
So I was saying how I appreciated Paul and how we have friends probably in common in Glastonbury and Palden, sorry, I thought it was. Also I was so impressed at the way he compares the situation of the Palestinians that he met and worked so long with, and our situation on Earth. So it was interesting for me. And also I had a question about the New Age, which is very controversial and socio-engineered, according to some people. And also the channelings are also controversial, because you don't know who, like Dan was saying, who is behind it. Is it also a way to control us?
Yes,
right.
You're right. Yeah, absolutely. Yep. I mean, there had been a lot of, writings about who is who and who's a lot of mudslinging as well on the messengers as well as the messages from the sources. Yeah, so we don't really know. And here in this platform at FESIG, we are very open-minded and we explore a lot of possibilities. So we get thrown rotten eggs as well for the choice of speakers. We don't know, but we just want to put everyone there for you to explore yourself. Yeah, thank you so much.
There are a few things I would like to say though in answer to your question. I refer back to the simple old advice that Jesus said, by their works shall you know them.
That's very good, very right.
It's in their deeds, not necessarily what they say or advocate, that you will know these people. And the second thing is that we must be very careful not to bring our limited concepts into the way that we judge people.
Yes.
Because, well, for example, when I first went to Texas, right, I had a prejudice that all Texans were kind of assholes. But I found out that Texans can be the nicest of people, you know. I've known terrorists, again, who I would judge to be people with some of the highest moral standards I have ever witnessed in human beings. And similarly, in my work, for example, in the Middle East, I've done occasional work with the intelligence services because through all of these things, there is both good and bad that goes through them. And I've always tried to work for, as well as I can, good things. How do I judge that? How do I judge a psychic source? In the end, it's about my feelings. I use my feelings and my intuition. And if there's something that's not right about something, I trust in my ability now, after many years of self-training and mistakes, I trust in my ability now to get a sense of what all this is about. And I've had this in the last 2 years because I've been dealing with cancer. And suddenly, after 30 years of good health, I've been dealing with all these medical people and medical terminologies, which are quite foreign to me. And it's been very complicated, but I've used my feelings to go through this and in all of the decisions I've had to make. And I'm very glad I've done that. And so I think a lot of the answer here to this is we've got to use our feelings and our intuitions to make these subtle judgments. And also, nothing and no one is right and wrong entirely. There's truth in everything and everyone. And even some of the greatest assholes in the world, to name a few, the generals in Myanmar, or I used to work psychically with Saddam Hussein, for example. And Saddam Hussein was a very, very hurt soul who was beaten up by his, I think it was his grandfather, every day for 17 years. Slobodan Milosevic watched his father shoot his mother over political differences during World War II in Serbia. These people are therefore, my personal belief is that there is no such thing as evil, but there is damage and hurt and pain which causes humans to do very, very strange things. And this is, to me, is the source of the darkness that we have around us, really, is we've got into this terrible habit of doing terrible things to each other. And I even must include myself in this. You know, I make some big blunders myself and really screw up over stuff. And it's to do with my capacity to own up to this and move forward on it and make things good, to learn from what life is teaching me. And that is how energy is transformed. And so, I'm something of an optimist, even though I'm deeply troubled about the state of humanity. And yet I've been in some very, very dodgy war situations, and the amount of human goodness which can come out in wars and crises is just amazing. It's just amazing. Right. And so within all of these things, within all the issues about social control, for example, which are coming up at the moment, there's nevertheless a glimmer of light in there. And I personally, I might be wrong, but I personally believe that we're going to make it.
Yeah.
And I want to be there at the party when we've done it.
You're saying that, to sum things up, the briefings from deep space, from the Nine, in those days, even though it was a work of 20 odd years, more than 35 years or so, had prepared us well, humanity, to accept what's going on and to be able to tide over the storm in today's climate, in today's situation right now, with the Extinction Program?
Well, certainly they gave us tools for doing so, yes. I mean, whether we do so or not is a very, very difficult thing. And one of the
when
guiding...
I had a conversation with you earlier, and I had conversation with Dan as well earlier about the book, we all three of us agreed that it was a life-changing experience reading that book. Yeah. And indeed, it changed my life. It changed your life. It changed Dan's life. I'm sure it changed all the lives of all the readers of the book, because then we realized, hey, this is confirmation. This is not just us here, limited self, limited human physical body. It's beyond and beyond, and we're connected to source, connected to all that is, connected to the rest of the universe. So this is testimony to their great big work here, isn't it? Yeah. Mm-hmm. And sorry, Dan.
I just wanted to say, I think Palden's words about compassion were wonderful. Thank you, Palden. And
yes,
you've been through a lot, Palden. Since we met, I'm very impressed and honored and impressed, and gentle.
We can always ask Palden to come back to speak again, yeah, Dan.
and it was actually about propulsion and how the ET craft do propulsion, and eventually I think James Rink might find that interesting.
Yeah, that's what I was going to come to that. I was going to bring James Rink, who is with me from day one at FESIG, and one of my three co-chairs. James Rink, you have something to say to bridge from those days, the briefings from deep space, to today with the SSP and what's going on up to date from the Federation. James, would you like to say a few words here?
I put those links there just in case something.
James has been muted, right? Yeah.
There he goes.
Yeah.
right.
Before that, I'm sure you heard of James Rink, right, Palden? James Rink is
Yes.
like the ringleader of the super soldiers. He was the pioneer in bringing the SSP into the big picture here on the planet.
Right.
Yeah, with the super soldiers, the
Yeah.
Super Soldier Talks website. Thank you, James. Go ahead.
Well, I'm not quite sure. So the question is there a message from the Galactics? Is that what you're asking for?
No, we were talking about how long ago this briefings from deep space was done. That's how Palden get to edit the Only Planet of Choice book that was published in the early 90s. So it was a work that had spanned about more than 25 years. So the briefings are awesome. It changed the lives of the readers. So what do you think? Well, you hadn't read the book, obviously. So we wanted to have a link here, like if you could be the bridge here from then to now, what's happening on the planet from the off-planet point of view, from the SSP side of things, from the Galactics, the Galactic Federation, the Federation.
Well, I still don't quite understand the question, but it sounds like you're asking me like, when did this first start, the secret space program start becoming aware to the public?
Yeah, I think there's a link somewhere because Palden did say that the Nine did give messages. That was a time when Eisenhower was in office, okay, in the 1920s, 30s to 40s, like that, when they sent, and this is a correlation when Dan was talking about, well, I mean, Valerie and I did know about the Tahitian Pleiadians actually has sent, oh well, you know, this lady, what's her name now, to Eisenhower to appear in front of Eisenhower and to discourage him from signing the treaty, the Greada Treaty. And then Eisenhower just refused that that advice and went ahead with it. But it's a good job they didn't do the nuclear war thing. It didn't.
Yeah, well, there was a lot more. I mean, there was more concern about the Antarctic Germans. This was right after Operation Deep Freeze, Operation High Jump. And so they had no choice but to make to figure out a way to repel the Germans. And the ETs wanted to restrict them from using any kind of nuclear weapons. And they were planning on using nukes to take out the Germans. So ultimately, thankfully, we didn't have the mutually assured destruction, and we went into more of a I guess the timeline we're in now. But yeah, so this has been an ongoing problem for quite some time.
Mm.
Yes, indeed.
But the thing is that the Nine didn't tell us about the SSP. That's the thing. And the SSP was like, well, was started way, way, way before the briefings.
Well, the Andromedan and Arcturian-led Galactic Federation, which fits many of the SSP stories, including Johann Fritz, whom James Rink had worked with extensively as well, his Story of the Dark Fleet, for example, that the Federation now has been successful in essentially booting the Nazi Dark Fleet out of the solar system. And it was specifically that action, which was highly interventionist, which ushered in the return of the Supergalactic Federation and the Nine, if you believe Elena Danaan, and clearly Michael Sala, Exopolitics, and my friend Alex Collier of the Andromedans all agree. And so these stories are fitting together rather well right now, including many of the SSP experiencers that James Rink has worked with in depth as well.
Interesting things here also is the subtlety of these interventions. If you look at the whole non-intervention convention that happens, the subtlety with which it is interpreted, such that it is a certain amount of intervention in a sort of a circumstantial kind of way, but it is not direct, and there are levels of intervention.
Well,
yeah, that's what's confusing,
The purported story is actually quite clear that the massive damage done when Eisenhower signed the wrong treaty really almost forced the hand of the local Galactic Federation to do large-scale intervention in the solar system. And that then set the stage for the arrival of the intergalactics and the nine now Atum, according to that group, which those stories fit together rather well.
Yeah.
So you're right. I like Palden's emphasis though on non-intervention freedom, because in fact, if you're growing your kids and you have to intervene every time, it's only when you set them free that they can ultimately learn. And so there is, and the Galactic Federation has a definite non-interference policy. But since the Nebu and the Greys and the Dracs had so massively become parasitic, some interference was required. Specifically, what they claimed was that they took out the Greys, the Nebu, and the Siakar Dracs, but that they left the remaining messes, which are human of origin, for us to deal with ourselves. So that Palden is really right in the long run, that they are still saying the same thing, that we have to grow up enough to meet them as equals before there can actually be, real communication. And that
I think also we've actually seen an intervention just recently, and it's called COVID-19.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, if you look at it, at the effects of it, you see, because the thing is that if they're going to intervene on planet Earth, they've got to intervene strongly enough to make a strategic difference, but they cannot create a crisis which is so large that it knocks people out. All right? Because if you look at disasters which are really, really serious, they stun people, they shock people, they traumatize people, and they make people quite incapable of moving forward. And so what you've got to do is you've got to engineer situations which are strong and potent enough that they make a difference, but not so strong that it really fouls things up. And if you look at the COVID phenomenon, and I'm talking about this not just in medical terms, but in social, economic terms, everything. If you look at that, it's an enormous awareness exercise where we have been given a question which has no answer. And this itself is like a growth enzyme which is changing lots of people. I live in an area of Britain, Cornwall, where people move when they want to make a lifestyle change. And believe me, there are a lot of people wanting to move here at the moment because of the realizations they've had in the last 2 years, because their lives got changed, they got shaken up in their normal secure patterns, and suddenly they had space to think. And so I would say this is the first of a series of escalating crises which are large enough to really force things to change, but they're not so large that they really put planet Earth into danger, and they make for high level suffering, for really large levels of suffering. So I think we've had an example of such a kind of an engineered situation just recently.
I would have thought a lot of us are thinking that we are on the brink of extinction. It's the Extinction Agenda, 2030. What about the Georgia Guidestone accomplishment that they have already achieved through the jabs? So that's the thing to think about.
Well, yes, but people have been talking about population reduction schemes for the last 50 years. And as far as I'm aware, the population of planet Earth has doubled during my adult lifetime. So something's not quite right. They didn't succeed. And all I can say is, I tend to believe that there are forces larger than these.
And maybe there's a context within which to see this as a conflict between the soulless AI versus humans who will have a soul, that is, take something through death. And we now believe we have some electrical engineering clue that the body's ability to compress, radiate coherent longitudinal, as in therified triggering lucid dreams, the clearest indicator of whether you will take memory through death. So, and yet when you see people with purportedly a graphene amulet in a vaccine and you see their aura dissociated from their body, literally failing to become centripetal. So actually teaching the physics of what it is to have an aura, which is medically defining immune health and immortality, literally, is the difference between having a soul and having an AI culture. And that is clearly from all our lessons, not just an earthly problem, but the tens of thousands of humanoid cultures around this galactic sector have a parallel problem, the AI versus. And that is a context within which to see these interventions, perhaps.
Yeah.
Thank you, Dan. I think if there are no questions from the floor, well, if you have and you want to unmute yourself and speak up, you're most welcome to do so.
I got some input.
Sure, Scott, be brief because we are about to close soon.
Yeah, well, a few things touched on. Amazing what you brought forth, both Dan and Palden. In fact, I can give you some help with your medical thing. I'll be in contact with some links for you. But you were talking about judged by them by their fruit. Why would, with all this going on for 30,000 years and all these, why would they give these powers to someone that clearly the American government that already outlawed hemp, already took away the rights through getting rid of the state citizen? They're working on Codex Alimentarius. Why would they give it, of all out there on the planet, why would they give this to something like a government instead of someone like the Amish or something like that? It seems a really big error. That why would that happen? I yield.
It certainly has happened, and it hasn't worked. I think that's...
Well, my point was, why would they give this power to Eisenhower or somebody in the 40s, the other, you know? And one more input that I have. The reason this is, it seems to me from my perspective, that they took care of the bullies that were from outer space, but the bullies here on Earth that were schoolyard bullies that now turned into police and governments, that can't be fixed by somebody else or it will happen again. It has to be us to take care of our own bullies. If we allow ourselves to be bullied, pretty much it comes down to, if we accept what's unacceptable, nobody could fix it for us. If they did, it would just happen again.
Yeah.
I yield.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Well said. Well said.
Well said. Yeah.
There's a lovely statement which has always been important for me through life by the 18th century philosopher Edmund Burke. For the triumph of evil, it is necessary only that good people do nothing.
Yes.
Also, well said. Oh,
yeah. I want to ask our two co-chairs, Dr. Fresel and Pontus, if you have any last say before we close this first session. Fres?
Well, thank you. Basically, I really like the summary that's been put out there and the idea of how we are developing as a people on this planet, as a civilization or as an entities, and our development and how we spread out. I did resonate with the comment of the 100 monkeys, and I talk to the group all the time as, I'm not the smartest monkey in the group. There's 99 more that are more. And the point that I'm bringing up is that in many ways, everybody who's listening today is that 99th monkey. Mm. And when it clicks, then everybody else will know, will understand immediately.
Yeah.
And it's just becoming aware that we are this close. Yeah. And it's in your heart.
Yeah.
And that's my point for the day. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you, Chris. Well said. Right. Pontus?
Thank you. I think we have to wrap up. Our next speaker is waiting.
Yes. Thank you, Pontus, for always being so practical.
Thank you so much, Dan and
Palden.
Palden.
I must say, I am so happy and honored to have my good old friend, Palden One, addressing us here and gracing our platform. Thank you so much, Palden One.
That was
been
great.
a pleasure, and thank you. And nice to
Thank you
meet
so much, Dan, the
Thank
one
you.
and only Dan, and
Thank you,
Valerie.
Thank you.
My heart.
Thank you
So
very much.
much for being with
Blessing,
us.
blessing. Hope to see you sometime, Palden.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In this world or the next.
I hope to get Palden back. So many wonderful pearls of wisdom. He just spills it out.
I have a few things. I'm not a technologist, but I have a few things to share with you about prehistoric civilization and the magical and I would even say geoengineering side of Neolithic and Bronze Age civilization in Britain, and the energy characteristics of things like stone circles. And so if that interests you, I can share a few things with you for that.
Let's have a date.
Great
Let's
fun.
have another date.
Great fun.
We want you back on the next meeting, on the 98th FESIG meeting, which is on the 2nd of, is it 2nd of March? That's it, 2nd of March. Could you pen that down in your diary, Palden? So
I'll pin it down, yes, but let's talk about it. I'll just have to see, but let's talk about it in the next week or so.
Sure, Palden. Thank you so much for the suggestion. We love to have you back. Of course, Dan's most welcome to come back anytime with Palden. Yeah. Thank you so much, everyone. We love you, and thank you for choosing to spend time with us in today's 97th FESIG meeting. There being no other business, this first session is now adjourned to the second session. Thank you. God bless.
Thank
Namaste.
you. Bye-bye.
Bye. You can stop recording now.